Hello, Java Challenger. I'm here with Frank Delporte. So, Frank is a Java champion. He has more than 30 years of experience, mostly with Java. He's currently a senior technical writer for Azul, and he runs the Full J podcast, which is obviously also focused on Java. So, hello,
Mhm.
Frank. It's a privilege to have you here. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to talk about one of my big loves being Java.
Awesome. Yeah, very happy to have you here as well. And definitely we're going to be talking about Java, career, and anything that's
Mm.
insightful from your career and your story. So to get our chat started, Frank, I'm curious to know about your career challenges and what could be valuable
Mhm.
to Java Challengers audience. And can you tell me a little bit about your career trajectory?
It's an unusual trajectory, I think, for a developer. I started as a little kid with a Commodore 64. That's for some people, that also tells them how old I am. This was my very first computer when I was 11 years old. And I think we were one of the first, we had one of the first schools in Belgium with a computer class. So we had about 10, I think, of these Commodore 64s. And we had one teacher who was very passionate about computers. So that's why he introduced them. And I learned programming with BASIC. That was also still the time you had these cassettes with your programs that you could hear them as music if you put them on a radio. And that's how I got, inspired and wanted to learn more about programming, also electronics, because when I was 14 years old, I controlled my Lego train through my Commodore 64 with a relay board. And for some reason, I still don't know exactly why, I went to film school. But it was a film school for technicians. So where you learned how to be a cameraman, an editor, so being on the technical side of a television and a film production. And I started my career as actually a video editor. But it was also the time when the switch happened from analog video to digital video, and people started editing video on computers. And again, being one of the first in Belgium to do that, I traveled around with an old, I think it was an Apple computer from company, to show how this new way of making video worked. And a bit later, yeah, people wanted to have those videos which were already digital on a CD-ROM or a DVD, the very first videos on internet. So with a very big challenge with slow bandwidth. So, and that's how I ended up being a programmer again, because yeah, I needed to get these videos online. So I needed a website, I needed a content management system. I started working with, I think that was FrontPage, Microsoft FrontPage, to build websites. I hated it, sorry to say, and then switched to Dreamweaver. And yeah, then the whole evolution from HTML to JavaScript to C#. I've always been on the side of, how do you call them, the high level languages like C#, Java, HTML, so never went into C, C++. That
Mhm.
was not my thing. I also did a lot of Flush and Flex, being the very first tools to build very nice graphical user interfaces for the web. So yeah, I'm also of that generation who made those annoying skip intro animations on websites you had at some point with Flash. But then yeah, you could build really nice applications in the browser with Flex, and then have some kind of backend like C# to store data. And at some point, I joined a company who built uh, information systems for trains. So screens you have in trains and the announcement system. And there again, we had the combination of, there we needed to use open source software, because we had one big project, like for instance in England, the Thameslink trains. So they have, I think, 100 screens on board. So if each of these screens would run Windows, that would be 100 Windows licenses. So we had to look for another solution. So that's where we went full Linux, Java, open source software, so no C# anymore. And that's when I made the switch to Java, I think about 15 years ago. And I really loved not only the language, but definitely the community. As soon as you start visiting conferences or try to get in contact with people who create libraries, then you discover how open these people are, and how you can collaborate into you can create a ticket for sure if there's something wrong with the library, but you can also try to fix it yourself and say, I have this solution, do you think it's good, and can you add it to your library, for instance? And that's for me the biggest pro of the whole Java community. All these people, Java being open source itself in the OpenJDK project, but then all those libraries which are created on top of Java and JavaFX to build graphical user interfaces, or like Vaadin, which allows you to create web user interfaces as a Java developer without ever leaving the Java system and having to dive into those JavaScript frameworks I don't like that much because they're not so stable as Java and keep changing and breaking. And so there's so much to discover within Java that for the last 15 years, I think that has been my main focus.
Awesome. So can you tell me what's your favorite Java library?
I definitely like JavaFX, and I know I'm one of the few remaining people using JavaFX, which is actually not true. So JavaFX has been part of Java, just like Swing, to build user interfaces. Now, at some point, JavaFX has been split off. So it is a separate project within OpenJDK. So people who are looking for the sources, they can go to GitHub OpenJDK and will find it. And I love it so much because you can build really good looking applications and still are on that stable Java system. And you can make use of all these evolutions. JavaFX has the same release train as Java. So they're now in version 23. And I believe so much in this framework that I started doing interviews with people who are using JavaFX for their tools and in their companies, because for some people, it looks like JavaFX is not used anymore, but actually it's used in a lot of companies, in a lot of banks, because it's so stable, it's so good, but not a lot of those people are allowed to talk about it because it's a company secret what is inside this application. If it drives your company, you're not allowed to talk about it. And luckily, I have like Ulas, who is a technical lead in a bank, in a Dutch bank. They have 2 internal applications running on JavaFX, and he openly shares this. I have created an interview with him. It's on my website, webtechy.be. We'll share the links probably together with this video, where he shows the application that is used in the bank and which is created with JavaFX. But I have a lot of others. I have tools which are free available, like a Swagger interface, like a Postman interface, JabRef, which is a tool for researchers to link to other research projects. But there are a lot more. And I'm still working on those interviews. One of the next ones will be with Almas Baim, who is a professor at an English university. He created a game library for JavaFX. And nice. Within that, I think, 20-minute interview, he created an application with live coding that solves, you have 3 buildings and you have to visit them in the order 1 to 3, independent of where they are located. And you just give this challenge to the game library and it solves it for you with minimal code. And again, this shows how much can be done with Java and the libraries with very little code. And Spring developers know this for sure, because that's the power, for instance, of Spring, like talking to a database. Spring has this handled for you with just some configuration, and only special queries need to be added. So yeah, there's so much there that I love, but JavaFX definitely is one. And then Py4j, but maybe that's a different question, is a project that I'm involved in myself.
Yeah, that's interesting to say, because JavaFX, such an amazing project. And I also didn't know that it was possible to create, games with JavaFX. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And my son, who is 14, he challenges me from time to time when he has a new idea that he thinks he will become rich if we do this. So from time to time, we create a website together. And now we are working on a little app, Melody Matrix. It's an app to look at music. So you connect a device, a piano, to your computer. And if you press any key on the piano or another instrument, that data, that MIDI data is sent to the app, and you can look at it. So we have a view which shows you a piano, the keys of a piano. And if you touch on the piano key in real life, on the screen, it highlights, and there is some firework-like effects coming out of the key, which is, again, made with FXGL, that game library. And I asked Almas, when we started this little application, I said, do you think we can create a piano keyboard and then some explosion-like effects coming out of them? And he said, yeah, I think so. And 30 minutes later, he sent me this little movie. Yes, we can do it, because here is a screen recording I made within this half hour, and here is the code. So again, within a very little time, we had a proof of concept. Yeah, this works. So this is a JavaFX application. It's Java, it's Kotlin. We package it as an installable application for all platforms. Whenever I push a change to GitHub, and you start the application a few minutes later on your PC, it gets the latest version. So all this is automated with standard Java tools or tools from the community. And that's the power of what you can build with Java.
It's extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredible. That's a very good idea. And I'm looking forward to see it when it's published, when you finish the project.
It is published, and there is a website, there's Melody Matrix Rocks. You can visit it, you can download it for free, because I use the project as a learning curve. I always want to learn more. And if I can give a tip to people who want to evolve their career, keep learning. And what I wanted to learn in this project is Kotlin, which is another language, but on top of the JVM. So I share a part of the sources as an open source project, the views, like the piano view and some other views. And people can get them, they can run them standalone. You can also get the application for free. And somehow we will find a way to make money out of this for my son, because he wants to become rich out of this, like like extra features, recordings, saving your recordings, stuff like that. You need a license, but we will not make it expensive. It at the same time as learning Kotlin, I'm also learning to sell an application. And I already know that's not easy. They say you have to get your first 100 paying customers, and then you're off, and then you can really start a project. If you want to start a business, for instance, I don't know if these numbers are correct. That's something I learned from others. So we'll see if we ever get to that 100, those first 100. But yeah, is there another advice for people who are thinking of selling digital goods like podcasts or videos or a sponsorship on GitHub, for instance, or an app like we are doing? Don't make your accountant crazy. I have done that with publishing some articles that I was paid for via very strange ways, because that's what happens on the web. Your accountant gets crazy. So what I will do with Melody Matrix is I will use polar.sh, which is a website, and they call it a merchant of record. So actually, you can see them as the manager of a singer. They are the persons selling you or your products. They make the invoice, they handle everything, they handle the tax pay, because that's what's driving your accountant crazy. Every country has a different tax system. So they do all that for you. They keep a little percentage of your profits, and the rest comes to you. And if people buy something for you and they have a 2-week trial and they are not happy, they will pay them back and stuff like that. So you don't care about that. And just like you have to automate the boring stuff in each project, making invoices and making sure that you get paid, that's the boring stuff, and it's only a time consumer. So if you can leave that to others, please do. So polar.sh is the one I will be using. Lemon Squeezy is another one which is well known. So they handle the selling of your digital goods, being a book, being if you want to do So you have this kind of, like you are creating YouTube videos, you can have this membership that people can get new videos earlier than others. That's also something they can handle for you.
Oh, that's interesting. So those websites, they handle taxes from many
Yeah,
countries, like
yeah,
internationally.
yeah. And you don't have to
Wow.
bother. Yeah. So, but I still have to make my first sale of Melody Matrix, so I will see how it goes. To be honest, at this moment, I should not tell you this, but my license system is not working yet. So if you buy a license and you become the first customer of Melody Matrix, you cause me a conflict in my planning, because then I have to implement this in my app that you can validate your license. There is already a license box, but the validation is just, you sent me a key. Okay, it's valid. So I should not tell you this, but if you want to try out the extended features, just fill in something in the key and it's okay.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely leave the link in the description of this video. And yeah, for sure, there will be Java developers interested in checking it out. So
Do you hear some piano in the background, by the way? Because my son is home today and he's downstairs, so he's trying out a piano for the app, so no problem.
I'm not, because Zoom isolates the sound very well.
Yeah, okay. Otherwise, this would be a music. There would have been some music added to this recording.
Yeah. So another question that I have from many Java developers is how to get started with open source, because it's difficult, right? In most projects, if you start creating a pull request with an important feature, usually it gets ignored or rejected. I always tell them to start with something small.
Mm-hmm.
But would you have another insight for them to start contributing to open source?
Sending a pull request is indeed step 4 or 5, mostly in an open source project. Most of the times, if you have a problem with the library, others already had it. So it's probably already somewhere in an issue, someone reported it, or someone already talked about it with the creator of a library, for instance. So the first thing you could do is check the issue list. Is my problem already there? If not, create it. Fixing an issue will only happen if you really provide good step-by-steps. Either I tried your library, I tried it with this and this code, and I see this issue, and I can repeat it in this way. Having some kind of failing unit test, let's say, that the creator of a project can validate your problem. And more importantly, can validate the fix. And first, try to get into contact with the project, being through mail, through a discussion list, whatever. I went into open source because I started working on a project again for my son. He was a lot smaller at that time, 5 years ago. I wanted to create a touch-based screen for his drum boot where he can control some lights. He can turn on lights and stuff like that. And because I was into Java and JavaFX, I wanted to use that on a Raspberry Pi, which is very cheap because I had some Raspberry Pis lying around. And I started doing these experiments, and there are not a lot of people doing Java on Raspberry Pi or on embedded, which is very unfortunate because Java was born on embedded. The very first Java applications were fridges and set-top boxes and stuff like that many years ago. So I started to writing down my problems, and that's how I eventually ended up writing a book, which is here behind me. I have it here also. Let's make some advertisement. Now,
Getting started with Java on the Raspberry Pi.
The book itself, the physical book, is sold out. You can still, of course, find an ebook on Leanpub. Again, we'll add a link to the show notes. But this whole process of writing this book, which is just me trying out Java on Raspberry Pi and all the steps I had to take to learn how to run Java on the Raspberry Pi, what you can do with it, and then the additional features of the Raspberry Pi, being able to connect it to electronic components. So learning electronics, that's all in the book. And now why I'm telling this story, because that's how I came into contact with the Py4J project, which is a library built by Robert Savage, an American guy, for the Raspberry Pi to interact with electronic components, with blinking a LED, reading the state of a button, putting a text on a little display, reading the temperature, stuff like that. So at the time, he, and mainly he, was working on this library 5 years ago, but it was a project that he was already maintaining for a long time. And he had other side projects and his main job. So he didn't have time anymore for that library. While he was already working on a second version, which was bumping Java 8 to 11 with a new approach, modular approach that we have now in Java, and then a cleaner architecture. But he was stuck. He didn't have time anymore. And by writing the book and getting into contact with this guy and having a chat and an interview, I proposed, let me take over the documentation from you. And I started on the documentation website of Py4J, because it's a pretty big, complex code base. If you open it for the first time, it's really well structured. But if you open it for the first time, it can look a bit scary. But by writing the documentation, I started understanding how it works, and I started contributing a bit in the code, and we really bumped it from version 1 to version 2, which is a different repository on GitHub. And since then, there's 5 years now in between. By talking about this project, other people who were also interested said, yeah, but I can also contribute. And the original creator, Robert Savage, he's still there, but he doesn't contribute anymore. And others have done. So we keep evolving. And out of the blue, a few weeks ago, a new guy appeared and he said, yeah, I see you have this ticket. I have a fix. He added the Maven wrapper so that we don't depend anymore on the installed Maven version of the user. Little things they said, yeah, I think this can improve the project. And first he made, we started a discussion, then he made a pull request. Since I think 2 days ago, I made him a committer directly in the repository, so he don't need to use a fork anymore. And that's how a project keeps evolving and new people can join. We had a student who used it. He was already on the website of Py4J. He makes a cocktail maker. So it's a big machine with these rotation pumps. I don't know if you know them. There's a little tube around these wheels, and you, on one side, you put it in a bottle with liquor, and the other side goes to a glass. And then on a Raspberry Pi screen, you select, I want this cocktail. And these pumps starts rotating and they take a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of this. So all these pumps take fluid from all these different bottles and they put it in your glass. So he made this cocktail maker machine. It's on the Py4J website.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it was, we knew this guy already. And then suddenly he said, yeah, I see you have a problem because last year there was a new Raspberry Pi introduced, the Raspberry Pi 5, which is, from a hardware point of view, a big change to the previous boards. And suddenly our library didn't work anymore on these new boards. And then he said, yeah, I know how to fix this. Here is my proposal. And then the others of the projects joined and they made it better. And now it's completely integrated. And we have now support for the Raspberry Pi 5. And yeah, so how do you join an open source project? Step by step. You start a discussion, you say, yeah, I think I have a solution. What do you think of it? Now we have the problem still with Raspberry Pi 5 that SPI is not working, which is one specific way of talking to electronic devices. One of the team members, Tom, is creating a new implementation for that. And then another guy also has a fork and he has made a pull request. And he said, yeah, this is also part of the solution. So if we can combine those, I hope we have a solution very soon. So yeah, it's making use of it. And it doesn't always have to be a code improvement. I stepped into Py4J as I want to improve your documentation. Let me write a new website for you because that was needed. So it can be testing. It can be fixing documentation, Java code, docs, stuff like that. So there are many ways that you can improve or help in a project or just talk about it. while experimenting with Java on the Raspberry Pi, I started using Vaadin because I wanted an easy way. That was for a DevOps talk. I wanted the whole room to interact with my Raspberry Pi that I had with me on the stage. So I had this little display, a text display and a symbol display with 8x8 LEDs. So I wanted to see, can I invite the whole room to interact with this Raspberry Pi and put content on the screen of these little electronic components? And I used Vaadin for that, which is the web interface built on Spring, which of course runs on Java on the Raspberry Pi. So I had indeed more than 200 people at the same time on my website doing stuff like that. And I just talked about Vaadin because I love it. It's easy to create a web. And they made me also a Vaadin champion because of that, because I didn't contribute to Vaadin. I'm just a very enthusiastic user. And telling about it, I'm doing it again. So you can become part of an open source community in many different ways.
That's very interesting. Another question I get a lot from Java developers is what project to choose. That's a difficult one, I guess.
Yeah, the one you use yourself, the one you love and are inspired by. So, like again, JavaFX. I didn't contribute any part of code to JavaFX. I'm again just an enthusiastic user. I came into contact with, for instance, Johan Vos, who is one of the main maintainers of that project, who is also a Belgian guy. I came into contact because, again, I was trying to run this on a Raspberry Pi. It didn't work for some reason, and we wanted to document that on Py4j. So that's also how I got into contact. Definitely the projects you use and you think you can improve or contribute something to make it better. Those are the projects. Are you a passionate Spring developer? Then maybe, I don't know if you know Wim de Blauwe, who was also a Belgian guy. He uses a lot of Timeleaf to create web user interfaces. So he wrote a book about Timeleaf. He created a few libraries, Spring libraries, that he published himself to the Maven repository. Then HTMX, which is another way of building user interfaces. He, again, wrote a book, has some libraries created for that. So you can also become an open source library creator yourself if you have a need for a specific thing, you don't find a solution, and you build it yourself, then maybe share it. A few other stories, people I invited to that I interviewed at DevOps in Belgium recently, Ronald, he's the creator of JobRunr. JobRunr is a library to schedule tasks. Like, for instance, you have a cell on your website, you need to create an invoice, but that invoice doesn't need to happen now. If it's created in the next few minutes, that's okay. Like JobRunr is something that solves this problem, and he created it because he needed it for a project where they had a need for such a tool, didn't find really what he was looking for. So he created JobRunr. Then, yeah, that was interesting. So he shared it. He made it publicly available. At some point, people were asking for support. Then he said, yeah, let's maybe try to sell it. And he was hoping to have one cell that he could take his wife to a restaurant and as a payback for all the time that he has been working on this project. And we are now a bit further away, and he has 4 people working for him and customers across the globe. So he wasn't even expecting to build a company on top of that. And he just did. It happened. I'm not telling you everyone who creates an open source library will have a company soon. It's a very difficult journey, but it can happen. And I see more and more of these companies who create a tool which is neat, like Open Rewrite, the tool that helps you evolve your software across versions and to update to newer versions. Open Rewrite, I just had a talk with the guy who created it, Jonathan. I will also be in the Fuji podcast. It was something he created at Flix. And now he has a company, Moderne, who maintains for companies thousands of repositories to update, for instance, from Spring X to Spring Y. So You can really build something big on top of open source, but it's definitely not easy.
Definitely not easy, because it's another skill. Like, to build software is one skill. To sell software is another whole skill.
Yeah.
Like, to build a business is another whole skill. It's
Mm-hmm.
not easy. So that's why I tell developers to, while you are focused on your technical skills, to not forget the other soft skills, because they're so important, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, it depends on goals, depends on what the developer wants. There are developers who want to create a business, or developers who want to be developers and focus on their careers as developers. But even still, even if the Java developer is focusing only in their careers, they need to know a little bit more of soft skills.
Yeah.
So
another nice story, again, going back to my son. So for drums, so he had an idea, let's create a website with only videos of drums. So people who want to learn to play drum or passionate about drumming, to play the drums, so that they have a website with, and again, with Vaden, we created this website. We use the YouTube API and the Vimeo API. So we don't host videos ourselves. We don't convert them. We don't have budgets like that. So if you have an interesting drum video on YouTube, you just add that link to our website and we link it to YouTube. Perfectly legal. YouTube allows you to do so. If you play the YouTube iframe on your own website, you're allowed to do so. Because if you click through, you end up on YouTube. It's views for them, no problem. It's a very nice website, very simple. You can log in, you can add your own, you can create tutorials. It all works, but we don't find the community. It's so hard. Even if you have a good project, it's so hard to find, again, your first customers. It's for free, this one, but to find your first people who join your project. And it's only if you have a big enough first audience that you can reach more people. So it's the same thing for open source libraries. It's so difficult to have your very first contributors or clients or whatever. And indeed, soft skills are very important. Going back to JobRunner, that guy started a little company. He got funding from the government, so he was able to go to conferences. So he talked on conferences about, this is what I created. And his very first customers came from these conferences. They didn't find his library by accident on the internet. No, they saw him talk about it and present it. And this is what I can do. And this is how easy it is. And this is how performant it is. So there are some programmers who become programmers because they think they can be behind the computer the whole day and don't need to talk to people. They are afraid of people and they want to stay behind the screen and do programming. But I'm afraid that's not a good approach. I'm now mostly doing docs, but when I was doing programming, as a programmer, you are solving problems that people have. And the more people that are behind you and the end user, the more chance there is that you are building something which is not really the solution for the end user. You're building the solution for the person who told you, do this. So the more you are able to talk to your end user, the more chance you have that you really build what the end user needs. And of course, we need product managers and project leads and stuff like that. But when, for instance, I was working at Televic on the systems on trains, we had to interface with a lot of different systems on the train. Like, for instance, on a screen on the train, you want to see if the toilet is available. Now, you cannot imagine how many servers and connections there are on a train. Like, there is a server who is only responsible for the toilets. To manage, is this toilet closed or not? Is it open? Is it available? So all these data is flowing between these systems on a train. If you've never been on that train, if you've never seen the wires going between all these systems, if you've never put Wireshark in between to see the data packages going up between all these things, then it's very hard to understand what you're developing. So should all developers now step in their car or their bus and go to the end user? Probably not, but try to avoid that you're just sitting behind your computer waiting to someone telling you what to do. If you can get into contact closer with your end user, the most frustrating thing is building something and then go sit next to your user and watch how they use it without you telling anything. That's a really good test. If you build a web tool, a web UI, I've done that several times, and you think you're finished, then just put it online, invite your end user, go sit next to them, and don't say a word. Just say, this is now your tool, use it. And within 2 minutes, you will know what you've done wrong. Because they either have no idea how to log in, to click which button, what to fill in on which place, and then you know the distance was too big between you and your end user. And it's very frustrating, but you really need to do this.
Yeah, that's something very powerful to do. It is something I read in a book. I don't remember which one exactly, but it was saying that if you really want to be a great developer, you need to show your product to your customer, to the end user.
Yeah.
But, you know, to do that in most companies is very difficult.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
If you're working for a big financial company like MasterCard, Visa, or whatever the company, or even a medium-sized company,
yeah,
usually there is a barrier between the developers and the end user. And usually you would have only contact with the product owner.
Yeah.
So maybe a solution for those developers is to maybe make the product owner use the system. I don't know, something like that, because or the developer could ask to the product owner, to the end user, so that the end user can use the system and see if all works fine. If, you know, the UI is good.
And that's the difference between a small company and a big company. I've always worked in small companies. I really like this direct connection and these short lines. But if you, for instance, look at big companies, did you ever try to upload an app to the Google Store? If you want to get this gray like me within 1 hour, I invite you to do so. It's the most horrible experience you can have. And why? I don't know. Is it because there are too many people involved in building that interface and this whole process? It's so complicated. Only the people who have built this, I hope, understand how it works. Same thing, Minecraft. Everyone plays Minecraft. Did you ever try to recover your account if it gets hacked? Because my sons get hacked every 2 weeks. It's so horrible to try to get into contact with a company like Microsoft and get this problem fixed. Why? Because they are so big and they build so many lines in between that it's just it. And this frustrates me enormously if I see systems like this. Is if you're building something for people, for your end users, then why make it so frustrating and difficult? You are the expert. A long time ago, Aral Balkan, I don't know if you ever heard his name. He was one of those very experienced Java animation developers, but now he's really into securing your online identity and stuff like that. But he had a really good talk about that. You are the expert. You have to fix it as a developer. Your end user doesn't need to know or understand how complex it is what you are building. They just want to do their work as easy as possible. If creating an invoice needs 13 back-end microservices, they just want to see one button, make invoice. They don't care how complex it is. They need to make an invoice now and not look it up how it works. And so making something as simple as possible should be the goal of every developer.
That's beautiful. And I agree with this sentence, not only with the project itself or the UI, but with code. Because like you said, the users, they don't care if you have like 50 microservices in the backend. They only care that the system works with performance, right? So yeah, I think developers, unfortunately, I still see so many developers who create so complicated code, like very experienced developers who don't know about the basics of, single responsibility, who don't know the basics about object-oriented programming. And then they end up creating code that is unmaintainable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a good idea, like to go out of their comfort zone, get out of their comfort zone, create simple code and make the UI as simple as possible. Don't need to create lots of complexity because the user just wants to use the system. They don't need complication. They just need something that works.
Yeah. And indeed, the user is also your colleague or your colleague developer or you within 6 months if you open. But be honest, we all went through this evolution. At some point in that real company for the trains, I was the only active Java developer. I had some colleagues, but they were doing other stuff. So I was the Java team. We were a little team at that time. Now the company has grown tremendously, but at that time I was the Java team. So I was working on several projects, several applications during a few years. And then we became bigger and other people joined. And at some point, a new Java guy joined with more experience than me in bigger teams. And he came to me, I don't understand your code. Why is it doing things like this? And at that point, I learned about single responsibility and stuff like that. So together we evolved that code base. I think within a few months, it was completely different code. But it was easier to test, easier to read, easier to maintain because we broke it up in smaller parts and stuff like that. At that time, for me, pull requests were a very good learning project. We didn't do any pair programming, which is better. But and my very first pull request together with that guy was so frustrating. Nothing was good. But at that time, I accepted his remarks because they were right. He didn't indeed understand my code. And to be honest, if I would have gone back to that same code a few months later, I would also have thought, what was it about? So making your code a lot smaller and easier to read, readability. And that's also why I love Java again. Everything which is now happening in the 6-month releases, a lot of it is improving performance, of course, but a lot of other improvements are towards readability and writing simpler code to achieve the same functionality. Like all the improvements in the switch case handling and instance of and all these things. Instead of very complicated if blocks, you can now have some switch cases which are very easy to read. So yeah, like I said, the user doesn't care how complex it is, your colleagues either. So make your code easy to read. Marit van Dijk from JetBrains also has an amazing talk about that, about readability. Is make your code readable, not only for others in your team, but for your future self, they call it. If you need to fix an issue in 6 months' time, that you can open the code and see, yeah, that's what I want, trying to do there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's so important to create good code for yourself. Like after 6 months, if you did, a bad job in the code, you would forget. And the other very important thing you said is, for example, well, it was a bit frustrating to work with that guy, but it's so important to work with someone who is preferably technically superior than you, because then you learn from this person. I think it's a problem if you work in a company where you are the best technically, then you don't learn anything. So I think it's crucial. Like, and I tell that to every Java challenger to, look for companies that they're highly skilled developers, because then they can learn from them. Like, not arrogant people who will disrespect others, but, developers who will teach you and make you better, basically.
What they say is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want good, go with others. So like this Melody Matrix.rocks, this little application I built with my son, he's the project manager. He has 100 IDs and I'm the minion executing them. So I'm again the single Java developer in this team. Yeah, it's our own project. So I can go very fast. To be honest, I don't have a lot of unit tests. So that's already a red flag. But I know what the code should do. I can test it. And so is it fast? Definitely. Is it the best application I ever developed from the code point of view? Definitely not. If you want to go good, then you need others. And that's a bit also the challenge in a startup. So I've been in a startup for 2 years. We went very fast. But did we always choose the right solution? Probably not. So it's always a trade-off. Go fast is okay for a proof of concept. But as soon as something goes into production, but that's the moment you don't have time, but you should have time to take a step back, look at your code and make it better. It's the test-driven development approach. You go from red to green to blue. So you go from it doesn't work, it works, now make it better. So that's a bit an approach. But yeah, make it better is the point that you don't build new features. So the product owner doesn't see any improvements. And that's a very hard point in a lot of companies. I've seen this happen again and again. We need to go back in our code and make it better and fix the speed or bump to a newer Java version. That's also something which makes your project better. But bumping to a new Java version, the only thing you will see is hopefully is improvements in the amount of data that it gets handled with the same instance. But there is no money value there. And that's why it's very hard to sell these improvements to your managers. And if you're looking for a company and they openly say, yeah, we have time for improvements, we have 1 day a week to go back into our code. We called it Bug Fix Friday. There's no new work scheduled on Friday because we will take a look at our bugs and how they are caused and how we can improve the code to prevent them from happening again in the future. If companies have such an approach, that's very good. That's a green flag.
Yeah. And yeah, to show management that the value of, fixing the code is not easy indeed, but it's definitely a cost to the company. The more the code rots, every time there is a new feature, it will take sometimes 1 month to create a very simple feature. If the code was done with single responsibility principle, if it was done following the best practices, it would be much easier. Like you could maybe deliver the feature in 1 week or 2 weeks. But then when the code is bad, then it's expensive. It's expensive because the company is paying developer to either add a new feature or fix a bug. And if there is a bug and the customer isn't happy with that, the company might lose a customer as well. So it might get really expensive, but it's up to us as developers to maybe create a PowerPoint presentation or even have a conversation with the manager. Say, hey, I have an issue here. We have to fix that. Look, that developer took 1 month to add this simple feature.
I had a blog post a few weeks ago about Java 8 is a ticking time bomb in your organization, about companies who are stuck on Java 8 or even older. Java 8 support will end soon. Companies like Azul will support it for a longer time, but still, if you're still on Java 8, you're taking away a lot of productivity improvements for your developers, like all these code improvements. So it's not only keeping an outdated system running, it's also what you take away of improvements that has happened, like the runtime has improved and the code has improved. And I got a lot of feedback on that article. A lot of people say, yeah, but you should not blame the developers for being stuck on Java 8. I'm not blaming anyone because it's a mix. Developers want to move, but managers don't agree, or they are running on a Tomcat of which is outdated and they cannot upgrade it because the hardware is not strong enough. There are millions of reasons, but please try to find a way to keep evolving, because you're having the risk of, the hardware can become obsolete, the runtime can become obsolete, security issues, the number of security issues that has been solved since even version 17 of Java, which is already now used a lot in production. If you are still on the very first Java 17 when it got released, then you missed by now, I think, 13 updates, and each update had several security issues fixed. So if you're on 17.01, that's not a good thing. You should be on 17.0, I think 13 now. So keeping your systems up to date is something which is so important, and being aware that these evolutions are happening. So maybe I can now promote a bit my podcast. So that's also something which can happen if you join open source projects and write a book and write tutorials and write blog posts, is because all of this, I eventually ended up working at Azul, which is an OpenJDK committer and a distributor of runtimes. And for that company, I also work on Fuji, which is the website for Friends of OpenJDK, for everyone who's interested in Java. You have a lot of tutorials and blog posts there. And I also create a podcast. Every few weeks, I have a new episode. I need to invite you. Sorry for that. That didn't happen yet. But like every 6 months, we have one podcast dedicated to the new release of Java. So we had Java 23 in September. We will have 24 in February, right? So every new version brings new features. Do you need to run it in production immediately? No. But by knowing that this new version is coming, and I think they have about 24 JEPs, which are Java enhancement proposals, which will be in 24. So there are more than 20 new features coming into Java 24. Do you need to use it? No, because it's an in-between version, like they call it, short term. It's just as good as any new release, but Java 25 in September next year will be again a long-term support version, which you can run in production. So if you already know by then, but in 24, this was new and I can make my code more efficient or easier to read by using this new feature, then by the time you switch to 25, you know what you can do. You've read about it, you've heard about it. So keeping in contact with what is happening within your community, being it Java.net, whatever, is try to go to conferences if your company allows you to do so and is willing to. A lot of companies actually ask you to do this. You get funding to go to conferences or take time off to follow some online conferences. If you're in the Java community, check if there's a Java user group in your neighborhood. Like in Belgium, we have 2, all the countries have them. There are also virtual Java user groups. You can join for free online and watch these all experienced developers talk about what's happening. So there's so many ways you can keep in contact with what is happening. Please do so.
Yeah, that's so important. And that's something I tell Java developers all the time. Get involved in Java user groups, maybe get started giving talks, because the more you do that, the more visibility you get for your career and you contribute to the community. And Fuji is an amazing place for that. Fuji, I will also share the link of Fuji here in the description of this video.
So Fuji is the website for Friends of OpenJDK. At least one article a day is published about Java, Kotlin, JVM, whatever. We have podcasts there, we have tutorials there, so please check the website.
Yeah, nowadays it's the strongest community Java blog.
Yeah, and we really invite people to join. You are only one of the 200, I think, contributors at this moment. So, yes, it was started by Azul. Why? Because there was not a single website where you could go to find information, up-to-date information about Java. Like if you go to Python I don't know what is org or something like that, you end up on the homepage of Python. You find latest version, documentation. But for Java, there were so many, and most of them were outdated and it only contained a part of the info. So that's what Fujay aims to be, the starting point to find everything related to Java. So everyone who has valuable content about Java, Kotlin, any JVM language can publish it. If you already have a blog of yourself, like I have my own blog, but I cross-post some of my posts on Fujay just to get more reach. And it's such a great way to become a Java writer, get into contact with others. We also have a Slack. Join the Slack and discuss with others what article you want to write, or does someone has experience with this, or should I write an article? Is it interesting? So we have Fujay and then Py4j, the other project I'm involved in, is that wants to be the starting point for everything which is related to Java on the Raspberry Pi. Not only for the Py4j library itself, how do I communicate with electronic components, but how do I run JavaFX on the Raspberry Pi? What tools do I need to install to be able to run Java on the Raspberry Pi? All that is explained there. So those are two projects, websites where you can go if you want to learn more about Java. And Fujay, just like you said, we invite everyone. Some people only contribute once, others very regularly. I'm now trying to really link the podcasts also to recent articles. But we have been at JFOL a few weeks ago, a conference in the Netherlands. I've been doing interviews there. So that's what I'm now combining into podcasts. But like this week, I interviewed Grace Johnson because she wrote an article about LangChain4j and talking with AI. So that's a blog post. She also explains it. So we will have a full podcast, I think, one of the next weeks about AI and programming. So there's so many topics. It's, yeah. A lot of people still think that Java is outdated, is old, is whatever. But actually, Python is older. So if you look into the timeline, Python is older than Java. Since we have this 6-month release cycle, it evolves extremely fast. Not fast enough according to some people, but that's because every evolution in the Java language or the runtime doesn't break anything which already existed. And it is already planned to be used in a new feature, like this instance of all these improvements which happen there. They are all linked to each other because they have plans later. How can we use this to start up faster? And how can we use this to use memory better way? And how can we use this to interact with C code libraries in a better way? So this is all related to each other. So they don't put something new in Java just to have something new. It's all really well thought of. I have no idea how I came up to this.
We were talking about Java.
Yeah.
And
so there's so many.
And that's something we as Java champions, we need to, to champion the language and to change this perception, because unfortunately perception is true.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to change this perception.
Yeah. Mostly based on, I was in the Floss Weekly podcast a month ago, which is about open source. And the two hosts, they immediately said, yeah, we don't like Java. And I said, yeah, but what Java did you use? But it was 1.5 and that's not the Java we have now. So I really invited them, please go back. Like I was invited because a few weeks earlier, they had the creator of GBang. So GBang is a way to run Java with dependencies without the need of a full Maven project. I have a GBang, so a Java file, a single file, which loads a few dependencies to blink a LED strip. So there's a little device in between, a serial device. So I have this single file. I don't need to do Java-C. I don't need to compile it. I just do gbang, the name of the file, .java. It fetches the dependencies. It runs it on the Raspberry Pi or on any PC with a serial link, and you have a let strip, and you can control it in any way that you want. So with a single file, gbang downloads the right Java version. It all handles it for you. So this is so different than, yeah, you have to install Java this version. Yeah, you have to install Maven this version. Then you have to create a directory. Then you have to create a POM file. Then you have to create a. So you can run Java so easily nowadays. They also simplifying the public static void, the whole thing. So there's so much difference between Java, what we have now, and people who used it 20 years ago and said, yeah, but I don't like Java. Yeah, but it's not the same Java.
It's not, it's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It's much faster. There are lots of other useful features that makes the code a lot cleaner. So it's more secure, it's robust. It's another whole language.
And it's even energy efficient. It is
Yeah.
research from a few years ago. So compared to C, which is then the benchmark, the comparison point, Java uses between 1 and 2 times the same energy as C for the same functionality. And I think Python uses it 76 times the same amount of energy. So we are with Java already on one of the most energy efficient languages, which is not only important from ecological point of view, but also important in your total cost. You don't need that much servers to do the same thing if you use Java instead of Python. So it's a good language. It's readable. It's up to date. It's modern. It's secure. Yeah, why not? Why not Java?
Yeah, it handles memory automatically. So there are lots of benefits, and it's a reliable programming language. If you see, many big banks are using Java and they're not having issues with the language. So can you tell me, Frank, what, if you like analyzing and if you remember throughout your whole career, what was your biggest technical challenge?
Then it was definitely starting up new projects. I've done a few, like in the startup, we were controlling robots all over the world it's connecting different systems. That's really challenging. That's the same happened on the trains. So we needed to display, like for instance, the toilet state and the next station and all that kind of stuff. If you rely on other sources, those are the really challenging things. Like on the train, I said there are multiple servers. One gives you the speed, the other one gives you the GPS, the other one gives you, now we are opening the doors. So combining a lot of different systems, then those are the big challenges. Now, since almost 3 years, I'm working for Azul on writing documentation. And now my challenge is making things explainable or easy to understand, because I'm one of those developers who likes to write documentation. There are not a lot of them. But again, making it as easy as possible for the end user. If they want to try out a new feature of one of the things that Azul is selling, like we have the Zing runtime, which is based on OpenJDK, but has another garbage collector, another compiler, and extra tools to start up faster. How can we show to people who want to try this out as easy as possible how to do that they get the results that they are expecting, or that they end up with something that they say, yeah, this was easy, I can do that again, and this would be an improvement. So now making things explainable, and that's something also I try to do with the Py4j project, is I built the same very simple setup with one LED and one button. If you start the application, the LED starts blinking, and if you push the button, it goes a bit faster, and after 5 times, the program stops. A very simple program. And I built that same application now, I think already in 10 different versions, like just run it on the Raspberry Pi, then have a Vaadin interface on top of it, use it with JBang, use it in Kotlin. So starting from a very basic example, how do I go from I bought a Raspberry Pi to having that LED blinking? And when I started doing this, it took me weeks before I had that blinking LED. And then seeing that first time, that LED flashing with a simple Java, it's only a few lines of code, but you have to find which lines. And that's in every programming challenge. Every solution is simple at the end. Once you know how to solve it, it's simple. But it's the path to getting there. And yeah, one of the biggest challenges was blinking a LED. That was also one of my biggest ones because it involved a lot of steps. It was the first time I started the Raspberry Pi. It was the first time I put Linux. I ended up with compiling the kernel at some point because I wanted to try something for Azul on a Raspberry Pi, which was not supporting a specific version. So I went this whole path from blinking a LED to something much more complex.
Well, luckily, other developers now have access to your book, and they can do that much more easily now because you went through all the difficulties to solve this challenge, but now you have everything in your book. So you can show the book again. You can show it to Java developers.
So it's in Leanpub. Let's add a link at the show notes. So it's a book. This is a test print I did on Lulu. So the idea is that you have the whole thing to set it up, and then you have some bits and bytes going from 8 bits to a LED display and stuff like that. So this kind of, where's the camera? This kind of stuff. So the little display you have in your clock, this is a perfect way to have one hex value, which is 8 true false values converted to a LED display. So there are amazing things you can do. Like this is a nice one I use a lot. So an 8x8 LED matrix is also a nice example. So it's different ways of, it ends with messaging through a mosquito queue, which is a message bus. So there are a lot of examples there. I keep updating the EPUB, the ebook, which is on Leanpub. And I hope to have a new version on paper next year. Let's do it, update 2025. They just announced a new Raspberry Pi Compute 5 module this morning when we record this. So I need to add some more info on the book.
Amazing. And I also saw, Frank, that you interviewed James Gosling at Devox Belgium a while ago.
Yeah.
How was that encounter with the father of Java? And did you meet him before? How is your relationship with James Gosling?
I didn't meet him before. And the idea was, like I did at JFall, I wanted to do interviews. And the organizer of Devox, Stefan Janssen, said, I have a cameraman going around. So let's give you a microphone and just talk to people at the conference and then see what you can do with it. So I created a podcast out of it. And at Devox in Belgium, you have these 2 very long tables with a lot of power sockets. So if you don't go to all the talks, you can sit there. And I was walking around with the cameraman and James Gosling was there. I didn't think he had a talk even. He was just invited. And I just put the microphone under his nose and said, yeah, can I ask you a few questions? And he's such a gentle guy. So yeah, of course. And I said, yeah, I heard you are the creator of Java. And he said, no, I have nothing to do with that.
Very good answer.
And his message was just, yeah, I started it and I worked on it for a few years. And then just something magically happened. And now we are more than 20 years further and it's still there. And he was looking around all those people doing Java. There are more than 3,000 people at Devox in Belgium. He said, all these people are using that language that I just wrote at some point because, again, I needed to solve a solution for myself. And then it became public. And now you have this whole industry on top of it. Yeah, he's not involved anymore. It's out of his hands. But yeah, he is indeed the father and the founder of it. And I think he's proud. He didn't really admit it fully, but I think he's proud of what has grown out of that little project that he started one day. Yeah, he's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he's very humble as well.
Oh, and I'm lying. I did meet him virtually. Let me check my list. Yeah. In the second Fuji podcast, which is July 2021, it was about embedded Java. And I was a guest at that time. Eric Kostlow, who is now a colleague at Azul, was the host of the Fuji podcast. And he invited Johan Vos, the maintainer of JavaFX, who also got into OpenJDK because he was the driver of bringing Java to the Linux system a long time ago. James Gosling was invited, and me. So James Gosling worked at AWS. He was working on an embedded project there. So we talked about embedded. So yeah, indeed, I met him, but it was virtually. It was a podcast recording.
Yeah, but
and it's still online. It's still
amazing.
online. Yeah, if you go to
Nice.
the Fuji podcast, we lost episode 1. It's gone. The very first episode is gone. If someone ever downloaded it and has a copy, send it back to me. That was about the announcement of Fuji, but that's gone. But the second one was about embedded Java, and that one we still have.
Starting with James Gosling.
Starting with James Gosling and me.
Wow. Amazing. And you, definitely.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's such an honor. It's amazing. Yeah, I really wanted to meet him at Devox Belgium when he was there, but he went, I think he was there only for his talk and then he left.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I couldn't meet him in person, but I would be really happy to meet him in person, take at least a picture.
And I think I had to push away some people to get to him because everyone wanted to talk to him. I had the luck, I had a camera and a microphone. I was allowed to push other people to talk to him.
That's a good reason because you're creating a video you can share with everyone.
Yeah. By the way, you were at the Devox. I think that was also the Devox that you came to my talk or saw me talking, and I want to thank you because after that you nominated me as a Java champion. So how do you get into a community is talking about it, giving presentations, and then unexpectedly having people in the room that think, yeah, we can help this guy to get to a next level. So that's also something which can happen unforeseen.
Definitely. Yeah, it was my pleasure to nominate. You were a champion already. You just needed the title.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, like you were a champion. So
there are a lot of people like that who are waiting to become next level in any topic, because it's amazing. It's unbelievable how many people are volunteering to speak at conferences. Like Devox has 200 slots and they have over 800, I think, CFPs, people who are proposing talks. If you explain this, like my sister-in-law, she's a lawyer. If she goes to conferences and is invited to speak, they throw a lot of money because they want to have good speakers and they pay them. She cannot understand that in software, people are so eager to talk about what inspires them and motivates them and what they like to use, that they just go for free and they really, make such an event so good, eh?
We are so passionate.
Mm-hmm.
We are so passionate that, we accept giving talks mostly, without being paid.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know. I think that's the reasons, because we are passionate. And
another message to share is, if you become a member of an open source project, if you write a book, if you start blog posting, you do conference talks, you don't become rich. Let's make that final. Even writing a book doesn't make you rich. Absolutely not. It's the experience. It's getting your career to the next level. It's getting in contact with other people and people who will say at some point, are you looking for a job? You're exactly the person I need for this problem. That's what helps you evolving your career. To get rich, I didn't find how to do that yet, but to evolve your career, that's something I learned.
With your app, you can be rich.
Yeah. If it ever happens, it's for my son to buy new instruments.
Okay, so your son will be rich.
He hopes. He hopes.
Yeah. So, and that's a lesson for you, Java Challenger, that, giving talks will definitely skyrocket your career, because depending on the subject you are sharing, there might be someone in the room from a company and they need you to solve their problems. And that's the best position to be in, right? Because like the worst thing is to go to an interview to see if the employer trusts you. And then you have to do the algorithms and the design interview. A better position is to share your knowledge, and then someone invites you to work for you, and you might even choose your salary sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a much better position to be in. I know it's not easy, but it's something worth it to conquer, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I recommend, like every Java developer wants to give a talk, should start small. Because even if you don't want to give a talk publicly, it's important to give a talk, at least in your company, to share knowledge. Because if the knowledge is only for you, like you can create a reasonable impact, but you can create a much bigger impact by sharing your knowledge with everyone in the company.
Yeah. I did that. So I went to conferences and I did a talk inside the company about what I learned at the conference. So I condensed several talks into this is important. This is what I learned from this talk. This is what I learned from this talk. So I became a presenter in the company I was working for. And that was indeed, these are friendly people. Everyone, if you go to a JUG, they are all friendly, but you don't know them. But inside the company, you know the people who are in front of you most of the time. So you will be more relaxed and it will be easier to become a speaker. But a JUG, everyone at a JUG comes to learn something. They're not there to throw stones at you or tomatoes or whatever. They are there to learn something. And if that learning process is you becoming a speaker for the first time and telling about a project, anyhow, you will be sharing something which is new for them. So they will learn, so they will be happy. So don't be afraid to step up to a JUG and say, I want to become a speaker. Start with the quickie, ask for 15 minutes or something like that. And that's indeed a very good way to become a speaker.
Definitely. Yeah. It's on the other point you mentioned, that the Java is a group of people, they're so nice. So definitely don't be afraid to talk to the JUG leader, offer a lightning talk to get started.
Yeah.
How do you see the future of Java, and even more now that we have AI? So how do you see Java in the future in this context?
I hope, and I think it's happening. Now we will get a lot of this AI buzz, which is happening in Python, will come back to Java because it's more energy efficient, it's running faster, and Java already has this foreign memory access. So it's a way to share memory with other code. Like you can call a C code, which has been designed, for instance, by a very experienced AI developers, created some tool in C. And you want to use that in your Java application, you will be able to do that much easier with this foreign memory access. Robert van Berg, one of the contributors of Py4j, created a branch of Py4j where he uses this foreign memory API to have a different way of controlling electronics. And the code that he created looks so beautiful again. It's so much easier to call C code now with this new thing, with this new version. He's using Java 23. It's so much easier. So that's one of the evolutions we will see, that it will become so much easier to call native libraries or stuff like that, which is like we have the Tornado VM project, which allows you to move some of your Java code to your GPU, which is able to do a lot of calculations very efficiently and very fast. So things like that are all ways to make Java more suitable for these AI challenges that we have. So that's definitely one evolution. But then the Java language on its own, how it's evolving, how it's becoming more efficient and stuff like that. So Yeah, there's so much happening. Like I said, 24 JEPs will be in 24. What will be the 25, the next long-term support version of Java? What will it bring? There will be so much in there. It will be, again, so much different than the previous long-term support, 21, and then the 17 and the 11, and definitely 876. So there's so much happening there. Yeah, and it's so fascinating to see how this evolves and how much people are involved, and anyone can get involved. OpenJDK, the source of Java, lives on GitHub. So if you really want to dive into how Java works, you can. It's there. It's open for everyone.
Yeah, this is what I love about Java. It's open source, and there are, big companies behind the scenes, like Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, AWS, like all the big techs, they are behind. So they are pushing Java forward because they know that to make their businesses make more money, they need Java to run in their cloud providers. And Oracle has, I think, maybe all of their applications are written in Java. So do you think Oracle wants Java to, not to survive for long years? Obviously they want Java to keep strong in the market.
And they have this weird licensing system, Oracle, but there are different alternatives. But they are the driving force of, if you look at it, every release has this block diagram with the colors of how much companies contributed. Oracle is half of this, I think. But indeed, like you said, there are a lot of others. Like at JFall, I talked with someone from Microsoft, Sean Lee. Microsoft is one of the biggest contributors of fixes and new features in Java, which is so strange. Like me, I come from C# and it was really isolated and you needed Microsoft licenses and it was only C# and nothing else. But now they have the biggest group of Java champions inside the company is at Microsoft, I think. So they have so much Java knowledge and so much projects on Java. So yeah, of course, we at Azul do the same thing. We contribute back to the OpenJDK project because we found ways to make it more efficient. And we created Crack so that you can start up within milliseconds instead of seconds or longer. Like
Awesome.
We have examples like Spring Boot starting instead of 5 seconds, it's 50 milliseconds. So projects like that really evolve the whole JavaFX ecosystem a lot.
Yeah, and Azul, I think, is the company who is leading the, for providing Java for most companies.
Yeah, we are the only ones who still have 6 and 7 support. So if people are still stuck on those Java versions or Java in the browser with applets, we still support companies like that. But one of my first assignments at Azul was writing a blog post about garbage collectors. How do they work? How much garbage collectors are there? Which use cases are best suited for which garbage collector? I did talk with 6 people at Azul who contributed to these garbage collectors from the very early days of Java, which also led to that I had a long time to finish this post because I had 6 different opinions of what should be in there. But there's so many experienced people at Azul who are really diving into the compiler and they really know how this stuff works and they make it better and better. And like we have our own garbage collector in Zing, in Platform Prime, which is used by top trading companies because if they want to sell a certain stock or buy a stock at a certain price, it has to happen within that many milliseconds. You don't want the garbage collector to block your application to buy something which has become more expensive so it has to happen within milliseconds, and having a garbage collector which can guarantee that is something we achieved within Java. And those companies prefer to use Java for such use cases and not C, because it's easier to program, easier to monitor, easier to deploy and stuff like that. So yeah, it's so performant and it's so evolving that it's just a very good solution.
Yeah, the most powerful thing about Java is the community, right? You don't see that in other programming languages. So I see that this is the true power of Java.
Yeah, I cannot compare. I've been in C# more than 15 years ago. Then it was very isolated. It was only Microsoft doing it. I know that also evolved. It's also more open now. But what I've seen happening within Java in those 15 years that I'm using it is indeed, it's so, yeah, everyone is so reachable, and everything which evolves with these JEPs, these enhancement proposals, what they really ask the community is test it. So like moving to public static void main. The first thing you need to know if you learn Java is a hurdle for some people. So what they want to do is that you can just do public main, I think. You don't even need arcs anymore.
Yeah.
It was already there 2 versions ago, but it was a preview feature. They were not really sure, is this the best way we can achieve that? So they put it in Java and they asked the community, test it, try it, give us feedback. So they made it better. And they made it better again. And it will probably be a finalized feature soon. But they didn't just push it. They really asked the community, we think this is an improvement. Do you agree? And if you don't agree, how can we make it better? String templates is something they asked feedback, and they got really a lot of feedback that it was not a good solution. It didn't work as expected. So they made another run, and in 23 they said, yeah, it's not what the people expect, so we remove it and we start over again. So it's all these evolutions within Java are driven by the community.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite things about Java, definitely. So regarding Raspberry Pi, Frank, what motivated you to start with Raspberry Pi exactly?
I learned from Tom, who is the co-organizer of the BJAP, Tom Coles, is you should only learn one new thing at a time. So when I wanted to experiment with the Raspberry Pi with this touch-based screen to control LEDs and lights, I already knew Java. I already knew JavaFX, so I knew how to build a user interface. What I didn't knew was the communication with electronics. So that was the thing I focused on to learn in that project. And Raspberry Pi was an ideal thing. So compared to any other PC, even the most expensive Mac, you cannot connect a simple LED to make it blink. You need to go to Raspberry Pi, which has these pins on top where you can connect LEDs and buttons and stuff like that. So that's why I need to go to the Raspberry Pi. The same happens with Melody Matrix. There I want to learn Kotlin. So in each project, focus on one thing to learn. Because if you want to do too much at the same time, you end up with nothing. And that was a bit my goal then with Raspberry Pi. Now with Melody Matrix is to learn one new thing.
Awesome. Yeah, because if you try to learn everything, you end up learning nothing. You get overwhelmed. And that's another challenge many developers are facing nowadays because of all the cloud technologies. Now we have AI, so there are many things. So talking more about career and how developers can get better, what do you think that are the most important skills for software developers?
I think we had that. It's being able to talk to people. Don't be that programmer that doesn't want to talk to people. So it's really understanding what your end user needs, and it's keeping up to date. Knowing what happens within the language that you're using, within the frameworks that you're using. Like, for instance, if you're a Spring developer and you joined the company a few years ago and they are on Spring 2. I don't know what, we are now on Spring 3, and there are some breaking changes in between. So you don't want to move from something which is 4 years old to, so keep an eye on what's happening within whatever you're using, with the language, with the build systems, whatever, so that you know what's happening. So, and yet I spoke a few times for students, and each time I have to disappoint them, as what you learn here at school is not what you will be using when you start working. I did film school, and the films I had to make in school was with a pellicule, or how do you call it in English? So real, like the old photo cameras. So you really had to go to a labo to develop your film. So before you could see it, it had to go to a labo, and you needed days before you got back your developed film. So whatever I learned there, I don't use anything out of it anymore. I had to keep learning and keep evolving and go to conferences and jugs and talks and whatever to know what's happening, to know what other people are using and how they can make things better. So yeah, keep your eyes open.
Yeah, so you mentioned about talking to people. That's something difficult for developers, right? Because many developers are shy or they are afraid of talking to other people. So what advice would you give to them to break this barrier, not being afraid to talk to others?
Just first start with listening to this video, to podcasts, or reading whatever happens on Fuji. And yeah, my solution is talking to people through what we're doing now virtually. At conferences, I'm hiding behind my camera and microphone. Not everyone can do that, I know. I'm not the kind of person that steps up to people I don't know. That's not one of my talents. So I found this as an alternative approach. On the other hand, you should not be afraid. They also say if you go to a conference or a jug, actually, you should not talk to the people you already know. You should try that. If you go to a jug, keep in mind, this evening, I will not talk to the people I already know. It's a very hard one. It's trying to find a way to get between two people who are already talking, or just getting close enough to listen to what they are saying and find a way to add something. Yeah, it's maybe something you can try, but to be honest, it's a hard one. I know for myself.
Yeah, that's a hard one for most developers, but very good tip. Like talk to people you don't know, because then you go out of your comfort zone. And then, it takes a little bit of courage, because developers might be a little bit insecure about talking to new people, but, just have to build up the courage, talk to new people, and see how it goes. Like, just make general questions. Like, usually the golden question when you go to an event is to ask, how is the event going for you?
Yeah.
That's a very good opener, right?
Or at the conference, what talk are you going to join? Or which talk did you already see and what did you learn from it? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Good starter. Yeah. And so you mentioned a little bit about how a Java developer should do to be up to date. So do you have any other suggestions? Because that's something very challenging. I think it's one of the biggest challenges from developers nowadays, because we have microservices, and with microservices, we have so many technologies. It's not only Java anymore.
No.
It's a lot more. And we also have AI, but for most Java developers, you wouldn't develop something with AI. You would use it, which would only make your life as a developer easier. But anyway, what would be your suggestion to help developers keep up to date with technologies?
If you follow a bit like what talks were given at Devox, for instance, all the talks of Devox are on YouTube. So if you want to learn something about AI, so those are 1 hour videos or a bit less. So that could be a lunch break. Watch one of these videos. I used to say follow Twitter, but that's something of the past. So go to Blue Sky or Mastodon and follow some people who are active within the things that interest you. But indeed, yeah, like AWS has so many services that it's very difficult to keep up to date with what's happening there. Read some books, stuff like that. Yeah, it's trying to follow a few people anyway, like on LinkedIn even, that are doing the kind of stuff that interests you. They will share, I've seen this talk, it's interesting. I've seen this article, I've used this service for this and it's interesting. And then try, like on Fuji, from time to time, we have these posts, which like this LangChain4j example I just gave, is a very small application that builds a chat GPT interface in a web browser. So all the code is on GitHub, try to run it. LangChain4j, if you're interested in AI, has an examples repository with a lot of different projects. Try a few of these. So most of the time you will find example source code and a description of things that interest you, and try them out in your spare time. Try to build something small and see if it works out.
Awesome. Yeah, those are very good suggestions. There are many videos for conferences, especially DevOps, and you can find any subject there.
Yeah, there were over 200 talks in October, so yeah.
Yeah. So talking about conferences, well, I think your opinion will be a bit biased, but it's okay. What are the best Java conferences in the world, in your opinion?
Did I mention DevOps before? It was originated it started in Belgium, so it's not the biggest one anymore in Belgium. The one in France got bigger because they have now two floors with 8 rooms. So they have, but it's really a French event. So if you're speaking French, then you should join there. But DevOps has several Vox days, of course. I've been to JFL in the Netherlands. To be honest, I don't like to travel that much. So planes are fun, but not that really. So I go to those which are close to me. JCon I also did. Yeah. The best conference is actually just the one you are, and picking the good talks. So if you have a conference close enough that you can reach it and that you are allowed to go from your employer or whatever way you can get there, just go. There will be bad sessions at each conference. A good tip is if you end up in a room which is already packed, just step outside and go to another room with less people. Probably you will end up with a topic you've never heard of and you will learn something new. So that's also a good idea. Yeah, there are so many conferences. Just try to find one close to you and go there.
Yeah, and talk to people you don't know.
Yeah.
That's important, to break this fear of talking to new people. And what is the golden advice you would leave to Java developers for their career, especially?
I try to have fun, and by having fun, I learn new things. Doing these experiments with Raspberry Pi gave me a lot of frustration. I said it took me weeks before I went through the first step. And in the end, it turned out to be fun. Joining an open source project, writing documentation, trying out several things, having a lot of test equipment now to try things out. So the same thing with the Melody Matrix app. It's fun to have my son playing music and me trying to visualize it in any way. So by doing some fun projects, side projects, I always learn something new. And that's maybe a good thing. I always say that you don't need to do side projects. You can be a very good developer if you just do your job, but at least try to keep up to date with what's happening within the system that you're using. And if you have some time, take a fun side project and try to learn from it.
Very good advice. And about books, what are the books you recommend to Java developers other than yours? Well, obviously, let's show yours for your book first, and then
I'm happy. I knew you were going to ask this question because I could check my book plank there.
Nice.
There are a few. I have them here. There are a few ones. This one I did a review, Mastering the Java Virtual Machine. If you want to understand a bit of how bytecode works, the class files, what's inside the class file, how does memory work, stuff like that. So it's not that thick. I'm looking for the number of pages, 200 pages. But it really gives you insight in how the JVM works. That's a good one.
Yeah.
If you're interested in Java,
can you just show
Yeah.
that book again? Yeah,
So
by the
if
way,
you
this
want,
is the book from my friend Otavio Santana,
yeah.
and he's another Java champion, and soon he's gonna be here to have a
Okay.
chat with me as well. So
And he has a very pleasant way of writing. So it's fun to read either. So it's, yeah, we spent quite some time on this book. I just did the reviewing, but yeah, it's a really nice book. It gives you insight in how the GVM works. So that's the main
amazing.
conclusion. If you're into JavaFX, if you want to do user interface development, I have tutorials, and others also created tutorials on jfxcentral.com. Another website we need to share is a website about everything related to JavaFX. But this is a massive book, 580 pages, building user interfaces. Another one. And then recently I got this book from Pact for review. You see, I'm not that far in the book yet. But it's a very good approach of it's actually solving challenges. Like the first chapter is all about text blocks and all the challenges you can have with text blocks. Then objects, then records and record patterns, handling dates. And it gives you certain problems you will face as a developer, like how do I convert dates? How do I store dates correctly? How do I visualize them to the end user that I have a consistent system? So things like that. So that's also a good book, but it's also a very massive, big book. But those are only a few. I have more there, but yeah, cannot show them all. But these are good books. And like, for instance, the Java coding problems, it's something I have on my site, and whenever I have something waiting for the build system, I can have a few of these pages and learn something new again. So that's the kind of book that you use it like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because Ken Fogel also recommended this book.
Okay.
Coding Problems.
Yeah.
Very good book.
It's a second edition, so it's updated. I don't know exactly which Java version, but they updated it for one of the latest now. So it really contains ways of doing it with the latest versions of Java. So that's a good thing.
Amazing.
So, is it 21 already? I think so. 21 or 17. Yeah, it mentions 21. So it's really up to Java, the long-term support version we now have.
Amazing. So now we can show your book.
And the most important one.
Yeah.
So this one, by the well-known author.
Yeah.
So you see a few of the examples. Actually, you have them here. So what I have here is, this is, for instance, reading temperature and showing it on a graph. So that's a combination of a user interface and using. This one is the user interface for the drum boot of my son, where you have circles to select the color, and it sends it to LED strips. And then you have this kind of display you have in your alarm clock, and calling an API to get the weather forecast and displaying it on the display like this. These are just a few example projects which are in this book, but it's much more. It contains a bit of Java history. It contains a bit of, if you never did Java before, this is how you do Hello World, and then up to controlling all these. There is even a Spring example there, I think, and then Mosquito at the end, so having a message system. So that's all in there.
Amazing. And can you talk a little bit about Fuji podcast as well?
Yeah. So the podcast, I took it over from Eric, who started it a long time ago. And the idea is to talk about anything related to Java, but also we had a recent podcast episode about staying healthy as a developer.
Amazing.
How do I take care of my body and my mind?
Nice.
It are, in general, topics which interest me, and I hope others also find them interesting. So I want to know what's in the new version of Java. I want to know how I can use AI in Java. I want to know what's happening with embedded Java and how I can use Java on more devices than full-blown big servers and stuff like that. So there's, we are on episode 21, 61. Yes, 61 published last week. That was the healthy thing. The previous one was Proud of Belgium. I talked about DevOps, JobRunner, Timefold, other projects, so on. So I have over 61 episodes, over 200 guests in all these episodes. There are also a few of these podcasts where I didn't host them. Someone else was the host because someone said, I think this is an interesting topic. Can I host it? And I will invite these and these persons. And no problem. I record them, I edit them, and I put them on the Fuji side. So we had a few of those. But yeah, a lot of different topics. I also last year visited virtually a JUG every month. So talked with the organizers of the JUG. So tips for other JUG leaders. How can I invite people? How I can attract more visitors? So it's out of my interest for Java and this whole community that I try to find an interesting topic. There are so many, so I have a long list of topics I still want to handle. I still want to find one specific topic with you, Rafael, that we will discuss the next
Java
one.
Career. Java Career.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good one. It fits a bit with how do I stay healthy? How do I evolve myself in my career and in my personal life? That's definitely one we can talk about. Yeah. So all the podcasts are either in your podcast app. So just look for Fujay, Fojay. They are on my YouTube channel. But if you go to the Fujay website, fujay.io, you will find them on the homepage. They're all there.
Amazing. I'm going to leave here the link from Fujay and the link from the book. And yeah, they are amazing. I really like Fujay podcast. I know that Frank is always bringing Java experts, Java references, and they are talking about the latest Java features. And so it's content up to date, and it's content to help you stay up to date with technologies as well.
Yeah, indeed.
So I'm going to leave the links here. Frank, thank you so much. And sorry that our conversation was a lot more than 1 hour, but thank you so much for your time.
Keep it to the end.
Thank you so much for your time. It's a privilege to have you here in the Java Challengers channel. And yeah, hope to see you in another event again. Hope to see you around and talk to you maybe soon on the Fujay podcast.
Indeed. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Frank. I'll see you soon then. Cheers.